I'm excited about our collaboration with DHA and your products, which are really magnificent and so important. As you know, we were talking about before, how DHA really is a building block for the neurons to create themselves and synaptic pathways to create ex novo, and I think that's really important, and especially in children and the bonding between children and mothers, but especially in children. I think young brains, the young children are the children, the beings of the future, and I think to have them grow their dendrites and create more BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic, faster and earlier in life. Animals as well.
Yes.
Yes, I think it applies also for the pets and the horses and the dogs and cats. And I think it's really important to think globally, and go beyond our species too. I think I think DHA is really, what you're doing is fascinating.
Kind of going into another genetic expression is the COX genes, COX, and that's, as you know, and many people listening, related to inflammation, and it's such a base level measurement, I guess we could say, of how much inflammation is in the body. And as this relates to babies and children, something that I recently learned from a couple of physicians is that the formula that is given to premature babies and babies who are having difficulty eating in hospitals is promoting inflammation. And the reason is because the base oil that is used is soybean oil. And you can make the probably logical assumption that it's GMO soy. And so that's, while it's going to have, maybe a small amount of the omega-3s, it's high in the omega-6s. And so if we're promoting inflammation with those omega-6s right off the bat for a baby, what is that going to do to the brain in developmental stages where it's so important? Because I just recently learned that babies' brains throughout the first year will, per second, create about 1 million new neurons. And this was a study published in Harvard that I saw. And just to think about that, 1 second, 1 million new neurons, and just the connections that are being made. And so if there's inflammation happening constantly based on what they're eating, how are they going to develop to their maximal potential? And so that's where, the omega-3s and DHA in particular really stand out, because that is basically countering the effects of the omega-6s. Now, people should know that omega-6s are necessary, and like arachidonic acid, that's a necessary compound for the brain, especially for children. But again, everything in balance, and you need to balance it out. And so that's, sort of what we're doing with this algae oil, this DHA, is balancing that inflammation and giving the brain and the body what it needs so those neurons develop correctly, the synapses can form their connections, and we can just give the baby and the child the best chance to develop their brain and nervous system and cardiovascular system, their skin, the mitochondria. It plays a role with cardiolipin in mitochondria. It's just a fascinating thing. But inflammation and where it starts, me recently learning this was just, really eye-opening to me, that so many of these children and babies are being fed pro-inflammatory compounds that are, many of them are genetically modified. So how are they given a fighting chance? To me, it's really incredible that even though there's so many children and babies who are fed these terrible diets, for the most part, humans still develop. But now it's like, okay, we need to go to the next level. And the next level is feeding children, babies, adults, kids, everyone, really good nutrition so that we can express ourselves genetically, physically, mentally, emotionally in the highest capacity.
I have personally taken DHA that you gave me, and I think after about a few hours, I was looking at my eyes. I'm like, oh, they're not puffy, and I did not understand what it was. And then later on, the second day, when it happened again, then I thought, okay, that's really amazing. And then I started putting it on my skin too. It's really funny, but it's a very good product. So just really, I think DHA. What was I remember you were telling me something about the creation that is unique. It has the biggest concentration of DHA available in the market right now.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, definitely. So, with fish oil as an example, the fish eat the algae. The algae is the source of the DHA and these fatty acids. And when companies have to extract the oil from the fish, they do it through different processes. And when they do that, it actually changes the ratio, the natural ratio of what's present in algae. It changes the ratio of DHA to EPA to several other fatty acids that are naturally present within that. So what we're doing is we're going straight to the source. We bypass the fish and the fish processing. And because we do that, we get the natural ratio that's present in the algae, and we do a water-based extraction. So we're not using hexane, which is also very unique. And as it relates to human physiology, the DHA within our brains, it's about 90% of the omega-3s. And there's a study published showing that EPA, because this is a big topic as it relates to DHA, is only needed in about 250 to 300 times less the amount as compared to DHA, okay? So we need about 250 or 300 times more DHA than we do EPA. And what we have is per serving, just naturally extracted, is 1,000 milligrams of DHA and 10 milligrams of EPA. So that's about a 100 to 1 ratio. And, from the research that I've done, there's no other product or company that has that specific ratio. And that's the closest one that I've found as it relates to human physiology. And so we've got the natural, true strain of algae. We do a water-based extraction, and we keep the ratio of those fatty acids where they're meant to be, where nature put them in those quantities. So we're not messing up those ratios with hexane extraction or with CO2 extraction or anything like that. We just keep it natural and the way that it was meant to be for the algae and meant to be for us humans.
That's brilliant. Yeah, thank you for illuminating us. That's really amazing. So the question that pops to my mind is, how did you come up with these ideas of ratios? Because it seems to be like, we're now talking about, I was just talking to Robert Edward Grant about 4 days ago, and we're talking about ratios of angles and ratios of, numbers. He's a phylomath, as you know. And I think it's fascinating to me because I'm definitely not mathematician, definitely far away from me. My brain is creative in different ways. But I'm fascinated by these concepts of ratios. And one of the ways that you get a very specific, like frequency-specific training is by extrapolating numerous ratios algorithmically and feeding them into the program that can give you the feedback. And it seems to me that you're coming up with ratios over and over again to create a better product. And so how did you come up with the idea of just tapping into these ratios? And tell us more about your process of invention.
So the answer, while I wish it was something as extravagant as, running numbers like Robert does in his mind very fast, what we actually did was we just simply look at, okay, what's the natural ratio within the algae? And because of the water-based extraction, we don't change the ratio. And so I didn't really have to do any work per se to come up with a ratio. It's just naturally present there. And then we go off of that. Now, correlating that to us humans, I've just looked at what's the biological needs within the brain and the human body for DHA to EPA. And it's just, simply what it is it's 250 to 300 times more DHA is needed than EPA as it accumulates in the brain. And so because of that, we just did the water-based extraction, and it comes up naturally with the 100 to 1 ratio. So really, who did it? Nature or God or divine consciousness?
That's brilliant. So you actually decided to just go, you were inspired to go and mimic or observe what the nature did, precisely observe it, not adulterate it, and then and then you extrapolate it in a very natural way. So is it true to say that you were actually studying some of the research that was published before, and that your observations were based on studies of numerous research studies published before, for example, the ratio of the APA and DHA available in the brain and what is optimal? And can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, definitely looked at a lot of different studies to understand what we need as humans, what's naturally present in algae, what are the ratios commonly used in fish oils, because those are much different, and there's a lot of marketing around EPA and why that's needed. Now, of course, it's important and it's beneficial, but something that I've learned speaking with true insiders within this industry who really actually don't even want to be named because of this, the whole thing about EPA, or much of it, is simply because the way that it's extracted, let's say fish oil, they've had to manipulate the data and manipulate studies in a way to show that this is, not necessarily what we need. So I'll kind of explain this again, that based on the way they're extracted from fish and even some algae oil companies, and this isn't to put any of them down because, I'm not here to fight with any of them, but based on their extraction methods, it alters the amount of the different fatty acids, so DHA to EPA. And so because of that, studies have been designed to really, let's say, put more emphasis on EPA when it doesn't actually have to be that way, because that's not what nature intended. So it's not that it's not true, it's just that information's being looked at in a different way where it's just not necessarily accurate.
So you found ways of simply non-interfering and then being true to the facts.
Absolutely.
But it's brilliant that you wanted and had impetus to actually go and study, because I think that's part of it. People usually perceive these things and say, okay, we'll slap together 1, 2, 3 and it's going to be fine. The fact is that behind all of these inventions usually stays an idea, and then about 3 to 4 years of tedious reading and annotating and plotting over Excel spreadsheets and all of those data, and then being pondered by our colleagues who we ask kindly to criticize our stuff, and then and studying it with them and exchanging ideas. And after about 3 to 4 years, then we can endeavor on designing a study and going meaningfully into the forest of the unknown.